The encounter. Alex stood at the edge of his broken-down shuttle, staring out at the icy wasteland. The planet, a nameless dot in the galaxy, was cold and desolate. His mission to scout new planets had gone horribly wrong, leaving him stranded with limited food and no way to call for help. He tightened his jacket, trying to block out the biting wind. The silence was haunting. There were no birds, no rustling of trees, only the sound of the wind howling through the jagged rocks. Alex had been alone for weeks, surviving on ration packs and melted ice. His body was weary, and his hope of rescue was fading fast. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the frozen land in shades of purple and blue, Alex noticed something strange. A movement, a shadow. His heart skipped a beat. At first, he thought it might be his mind playing tricks on him. Loneliness did that sometimes. But then he saw it again, a figure in the distance, stumbling through the snow. It was small, fragile-looking, and moving slowly, as if every step was a struggle. Alex's instincts screamed at him to stay hidden. He didn't know what kind of creatures lived on this planet, but it wasn't safe to assume they were friendly. He crouched behind a rock, watching carefully. The figure came closer. It was a humanoid shape, covered in what looked like tattered robes. As it approached, Alex could see more details. A glowing blue hue to its skin, long, delicate fingers, and large, dark eyes that seemed to reflect the starlight. It wasn't human. The figure stumbled and fell face first into the snow, lying still. Alex's breath caught in his throat. Was it a trap? Maybe the creature wasn't alone. He scanned the horizon, looking for others, but the icy plains were empty. Minutes passed, and the figure didn't move. It was either unconscious or dead. Damn it, Alex muttered under his breath. He couldn't just leave it there. Against his better judgment, he crept forward, keeping his knife ready. As he approached, he saw how frail the creature looked. Its robes were torn, and its body shivered violently in the cold. Its chest moved slightly, still alive. Alex knelt down, hesitating. Up close, the alien's glowing skin looked even more unnatural, but there was something deeply vulnerable about it. He thought of the times he had been in trouble, praying someone would help him. Could he really walk away now? He lifted the alien into his arms. It was lighter than he expected, almost weightless. Its skin was icy to the touch, and he could feel its trembling even through his thick gloves. Back at the shelter, Alex laid the alien on a blanket near the small heater. He wrapped another blanket around it, hoping the warmth would help. The alien's eyes fluttered open briefly, meeting Alex. "Hey, easy," Alex said softly. "You're safe here." The alien didn't respond, but a faint sound escaped its lips, something like a whimper. Alex rummaged through his supplies, pulling out a ration pack. It wasn't much, but it might be enough to give the alien some energy. He opened the pack and held it out. The alien looked at the food, then at Alex, its large eyes filled with confusion. Slowly, it reached out with trembling fingers, taking a small piece. As soon as the food touched its lips, tears began streaming down the alien's face. It made soft, pitiful sounds, as if crying in relief. Alex watched, unsure what to say. "You must have been starving," he murmured. The alien finished the food quickly, then looked at Alex again. Its tears hadn't stopped, but now there was something else in its expression. Gratitude. For the first time in weeks, Alex didn't feel alone. Outside, the wind howled louder, and the darkness deepened. But inside the small shelter, there was a faint sense of warmth. Alex didn't know who this alien was or why it was here, but he felt a strange connection. Maybe this was what he needed, a reminder that even in the harshest places, life could still find a way. As the alien drifted into a restless sleep, Alex sat nearby, his knife still within reach. He didn't know what dangers tomorrow might bring, but for tonight, they had each other. And for now, that was enough. A cry for help. The small shelter was eerily quiet, save for the faint sound of the alien's breathing. Alex sat by the dim heater, his knife resting on his knee. He wasn't sure how much sleep he'd gotten, if any. His mind raced with questions. Who was this alien? Where had she come from? And why had she been wandering the frozen wasteland alone? Morning came slowly, the pale light creeping through the cracks in the shelter. Alex stirred the small pot of water he'd melted from ice, trying to stretch his limited rations. The alien woman, still wrapped in layers of blankets, shifted slightly. Her glowing skin had dimmed during the night, and her shivering had stopped. When her eyes fluttered open, Alex felt a wave of relief. She was alive. But as their gazes met, her expression was filled with fear. She pushed herself back against the wall of the shelter, her hands raised defensively. Hey, Alex said, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. It's okay. You're safe here. The alien looked at him, her dark eyes scanning his face, then the small space around them. Slowly, her hands lowered. She said something, her voice soft but rapid, the words completely alien to Alex. I don't understand, he said, shaking his head. He pointed to himself. Alex. Then he gestured toward her, hoping she'd give him a name. She hesitated, then placed a hand on her chest. Lyra, she said, her voice trembling. Lyra, Alex repeated. He nodded, offering the small smile. She didn't smile back. Instead, her eyes darted to the ration pack sitting near the heater. Alex grabbed it and handed it to her. Lyra hesitated, then took it, her fingers brushing his. Her skin was still cold, but not as icy as before. As she ate, Alex watched her carefully. There was something haunting in the way she chewed the food, her tears from the previous night still fresh in his memory. She must have been starving for days, maybe longer. But there was more to her than just hunger. Alex could see it in her eyes, a deep sadness, a weight she carried that seemed far heavier than her frail body. Once she finished eating, Lyra sat quietly, staring at the heater. Alex decided to try again. He grabbed a stick and started drawing in the dirt floor of the shelter. First, he drew a crude figure of himself, then pointed to it. Alex, he said again. Lyra watched, tilting her head. She seemed to understand. Next, Alex drew a figure of her, giving it the same glowing outline he'd seen on her skin. He looked at her, waiting. Lyra, she said softly, pointing to the drawing. Alex nodded. Good. Now we're getting somewhere. He drew the shelter next, then the planet's two suns. Lyra's expression changed. She pointed to the drawing of the planet, then began speaking quickly in her own language. Her hands moved in frantic gestures, pointing to the horizon, then to herself, then back to the planet. Slow down, Alex said, holding up his hands. I don't understand. She stopped, biting her lip. After a moment, she reached for the stick and started drawing herself. Her movements were shaky, but Alex could see what she was trying to show. A group of figures, similar to her, all standing together. Her people. Then she drew other figures, taller, bulkier, and more menacing. She added weapons to their hands, then drew flames and destruction around them. Alex felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. They attacked your people, he asked, pointing to the menacing figures. Lyra nodded, her eyes filling with tears. She added another drawing. Herself, alone, running away from the chaos. You escaped, Alex said softly. Lyra's hand trembled as she drew one last figure. A large, ominous shape, unlike anything Alex had seen before. It had no face, just a dark void, and it loomed over the others like a shadow. What is that? Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Lyra didn't answer. She simply stared at the drawing, her hands gripping the stick tightly. Her breathing grew faster, and Alex realized she was panicking. Hey, he said gently, reaching out to touch her arm. It's okay. You're safe here. Lyra looked at him, her chest rising and falling rapidly. Then, without warning, she burst into tears. Her sobs were quiet but gut-wrenching, her body shaking as she buried her face in her hands. Alex sat back, unsure what to do. He wasn't good with emotions, and comforting an alien wasn't exactly something he'd trained for. But as he watched her cry, he felt an ache in his chest. He moved closer, speaking softly. "You're not alone anymore, Lyra. We'll figure this out. I'll help you." Her sobs quieted slightly, and she looked at him through tear-streaked eyes. For the first time, Alex saw a flicker of hope in her expression. Outside, the wind howled, and the icy cold pressed against the shelter. But inside, there was warmth, not from the heater, but from something deeper. A connection. Alex didn't know how he was going to keep that promise, but one thing was clear. Lyra wasn't just some stranger he rescued. She was someone worth fighting for. The bond grows. The days that followed were a blur of routine. Alex and Lyra adapted to each other's presence, finding ways to communicate despite the language barrier. They shared food, traded stories in broken words and gestures, and learned about each other. At first, Lyra was silent most of the time. She would stare out of the shelter's small windows, her glowing skin dimming as she withdrew into herself. Her eyes, always filled with some quiet sadness, would sometimes flicker with fear, especially when she looked up at the sky, as though something, or someone, was watching her. Alex, though used to solitude, couldn't ignore the feeling of unease that settled over him every time she grew distant. It wasn't just the physical distance. There was a wall inside her, something Alex couldn't break through. She had told him bits and pieces of her story, how her planet had been invaded, how she had fled to escape capture, but much remained unsaid. She never spoke of the shadowy figure she had drawn, the terrifying presence that had haunted her mind. But something began to change. One evening, as Alex sat by the heater, fiddling with the broken circuits of his radio, Lyra approached him. She held a small bundle in her hands. She hesitated for a moment, then unwrapped the bundle to reveal something that glimmered. It was a small, delicate stone, glowing softly with an inner light, just like her skin. Alex raised an eyebrow. "What is this?" Lyra placed the stone in his palm and nodded, her large eyes earnest. She tried to speak, but her words were foreign. As always, she pointed to the stone, then to herself, and then to the sky. Alex didn't understand the connection, but he recognized the emotion in her eyes. "It's important to you, isn't it?" She nodded again, pressing her hand over his, holding the stone there for a moment before pulling away. She looked at him with a deep, searching gaze, and Alex realized this wasn't just about the stone. It was about trust. "I don't know what it means," Alex said quietly, "but I'll keep it safe. I promise." Lyra smiled, the first true smile Alex had seen on her face. It wasn't wide or full of joy, but it was a smile nonetheless. She settled down beside him, and for the first time in a long while, the silence between them didn't feel heavy. It felt comfortable. Over the next few days, Lyra started to open up in small ways. She began teaching Alex the basics of her language, using gestures, sounds, and the drawings she had made. It was slow progress, but each day felt like a small victory. One evening, after Alex had finished his ration and was cleaning up, Lyra reached out to him. She held a piece of food in her hand and gestured for him to take it. "Thanks," Alex said, taking it. As he did, he noticed something strange. The food wasn't from his supplies, it was from hers. It was a strange fruit, glowing with the same blue light as her skin. He paused, looking at her. "Where did you find this?" Lyra's eyes darkened, and she bit her lip, hesitant to answer. She pointed to the ice outside, then mimicked the act of picking something from the ground. "You picked it yourself?" Alex asked. Lyra nodded. Alex felt a pang of guilt. She had been so careful about rationing their supplies, yet here she was, giving him something she'd found. Something rare. He wondered how long she had been saving it. How long she had been alone, looking for food and shelter while running from whatever had destroyed her home. "Thank you," he said sincerely. Lyra gave a small nod but didn't say anything. There was still a shadow behind her eyes, a lingering sadness that Alex couldn't shake. Yet despite the sorrow that seemed to define her, there was also a quiet strength. The next few days brought more small moments of connection. Lyra began to show him more of her people's language, and Alex started to pick up on it. He found himself fascinated by the way her words seemed to flow, like a melody in the air. It was beautiful, even if he didn't fully understand it. One night, as they sat around the heater, Lyra spoke to him in her language again. This time, her tone was different. There was a sense of urgency in her voice. She pointed to the horizon outside the shelter, then mimicked the act of running with both hands, her face tight with worry. "What is it?" Alex asked, concern creeping into his voice. Lyra shook her head, her expression grim. She pointed to the stone he had promised to protect, then to her chest. She seemed to be saying that it was a symbol of her people's power, their connection to the land, to the very core of their planet. Alex listened carefully, piecing together the fragments of her story. It wasn't just an ordinary stone. It was something that could help her people, something powerful enough to fight back against the empire that had destroyed her home. But it was clear that the stone alone wouldn't be enough. Whatever had caused her to flee, whatever had chased her across the galaxy, was still out there, waiting. Alex stood up, determination flooding his chest. "We'll figure this out, Lyra. I don't know how, but we'll find a way." Lyra looked at him, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Her fingers brushed the stone in his palm, and for a brief moment, Alex thought he could feel its energy humming faintly, like a heartbeat, like the pulse of a living thing. For the first time, Alex didn't feel the weight of loneliness. He wasn't just protecting someone who had fallen from the stars. He was becoming part of something much larger. He was helping Lyra find her people, to reconnect with the strength they had lost. And in that moment, Alex knew he had made a promise to more than just Lyra. He had promised to help her save her world. The hunters arrive. The wind outside howled like a beast on the prowl, rattling the shelter's thin walls. The pale light from the two suns had long disappeared, and the darkened skies stretched out endlessly. Inside the small, dim shelter, Alex sat by the fire, his mind heavy with thoughts of the future. He had promised Lyra that they would figure things out, but with every passing day, the pressure of keeping her safe grew more intense. Lyra had become quieter again. Her eyes constantly scanned the horizon, her senses always on edge. It was as if she could feel something, some looming threat, closing in on them. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had driven her to this desolate world was still hunting her. He tried to reassure her, but Lyra rarely spoke of her past now. She was always watching, waiting, like a prey animal sensing danger in the wind. Tonight was different. As the cold grew more biting and the storm outside picked up speed, Alex heard something that froze his blood. The unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps crunching through the ice. At first, he thought it was the wind playing tricks on him. But then, there it was again, closer this time. Lyra's head snapped up, her body tense as she stood. Her eyes widened in fear, and she moved quickly to the small window. Alex didn't need to ask what was happening. He could see the panic in her eyes, the way she gripped the edge of the table for support. "Lyra," he called, his voice low. "What is it?" She didn't respond. Her gaze was locked on the darkness outside. Slowly, she pulled away from the window and went to her pack. She started to gather her things. Her knife, a small communication device Alex hadn't seen before, and the glowing stone. But when she reached for the stone, Alex stepped forward, reaching out to stop her. "Wait," he said, his voice sharp with concern. "What's going on? Who's out there?" Lyra's hands shook as she looked at him. Her voice was barely a whisper, as if the words were too heavy to speak. "Hunters." Alex's stomach dropped. His mind raced with the implications. Hunters. Whoever, or whatever, they were, They weren't just searching for Lyra. They were after something else. Hunters, Alex repeated. Who are they? Lyra's eyes flicked toward the door, then back to him. She shook her head slowly, her lips pressed tightly together, refusing to elaborate. Alex moved to the window, peering out into the storm. The winds had picked up even more, making it impossible to see clearly. But then, just as he was about to pull back, he saw something. Shapes moving through the blizzard, their outlines faint but unmistakable. They were coming for him, for both of them. Damn it, Alex muttered under his breath. He turned back to Lyra. How many of them are there? She hesitated for a long moment before answering, her voice filled with dread. More than you think. Suddenly, the door shuddered. Alex's heart skipped a beat as the heavy thud of boots against the frozen ground grew louder. They were closing in, and fast. Lyra's breathing became erratic, her hands trembling uncontrollably. She grabbed Alex's arm, her grip like iron. I can't fight them, she whispered urgently, her voice raw with fear. They are too strong. You don't understand. Alex looked at her, feeling the weight of her fear pressing down on him. Then what do? We can't just sit here and wait for them to find us. Lyra's eyes flickered to the stone in her hands, and for a moment, Alex thought he saw something more than just fear in her eyes. There was resolve. I'll protect you, she said, her voice steady despite the panic. Before Alex could respond, there was a loud crash at the door. The storm outside was nothing compared to the force that slammed against the wooden frame. The door splintered, and in an instant, the shelter was breached. The first hunter appeared, tall with a broad, muscular frame. His armor was dark, reflecting little light, and his helmet was shaped like a skull, its eyes glowing red like an ominous warning. He stepped inside, his boots crunching against the broken door as he scanned the room with a predatory gaze. Behind him, more figures emerged from the blizzard. They were all of similar size, their movements synchronized like a pack of hunters on the prowl. Alex knew they weren't here for a casual visit. They had come with one goal in mind: capture or kill. Alex moved quickly, reaching for his knife. He had no idea what he was up against, but one thing was clear: he couldn't let them take Lyra. Lyra grabbed his arm, pulling him back. You don't stand a chance against them, she hissed. They're not normal. Please, don't fight them. But it was too late. The leader of the hunters raised his arm, signaling his team to advance. We're not here for a fight, human, the hunter said in a low, gravelly voice. We're here for her. Lyra flinched, her face pale as the words hit her like a slap. You can't have her, Alex said, his voice filled with cold determination. Leave now, and maybe I'll let you walk away. The hunter chuckled darkly, a humorless sound. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Without warning, the hunter lunged forward, his hand aiming for Lyra. Alex reacted instantly, using every ounce of his training to shove her out of the way. In the process, he managed to land a quick strike with his knife, but the hunter's armor absorbed the blow with ease. The other hunters moved swiftly, their advanced weapons drawn. Alex was outnumbered, and the odds were stacked against him. But the anger and fear for Lyra surged inside him, fueling him to fight. He wasn't going to let them take her, not without a fight. Lyra, he shouted, looking back to her, now's your chance. Run. But instead of running, Lyra did something Alex hadn't expected. She stepped forward, her eyes glowing with an eerie light, a surge of energy radiating from her body. The hunters hesitated for a split second, unsure of what was happening. Then, in a flash, Lyra's power exploded outward, a force so intense that it knocked the hunters back. The shelter's walls groaned under the pressure, and Alex was nearly thrown off his feet. Go! Lyra shouted, her voice filled with fierce resolve. Alex didn't need any more encouragement. He grabbed Lyra's arm and pulled her toward the back exit, his heart racing with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. The fight wasn't over, but for now, they had one shot at escaping. The hunters were still recovering, but Alex knew they wouldn't stop until they had what they came for. It was a race against time, and they had no idea where it would leave them. Secrets revealed. The air outside the shelter bit at their skin as they fled through the icy wasteland, the storm still raging around them. Alex's breath came in quick, shallow gasps as he pulled Lyra along, her frail body somehow keeping up with his hurried pace. Her glowing skin, dimmer now but still noticeable in the bleak landscape, cast a soft light across the snow, making her look almost ethereal against the backdrop of endless white. They had managed to escape the hunters, for now, but Alex knew it wouldn't be long before they regrouped and came after them again. Every step they took felt like a countdown, a clock ticking down to some unknown moment when their luck would run out. Lyra was silent beside him, her eyes constantly scanning the horizon. She was no longer crying, but her face had become a mask of determination. Every so often, she would glance at the stone she still clutched in her hands, her grip tight as though it were the only thing keeping her grounded in the storm. "We need to find shelter," Alex said through the wind, his voice barely audible. "Somewhere they won't be able to find us." Lyra didn't respond immediately, her eyes distant, as though she were lost in some internal battle. Then, after a long pause, she spoke. "There's a place, but it's dangerous." Alex's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean, dangerous?" Lyra didn't answer right away. Instead, she pointed to the horizon, to the jagged peaks in the distance, the ones they had avoided when they first arrived. "It's a hidden place, a refuge for my people. But the Empire, they guard it." Alex stopped walking, his mind racing. "The Empire." Lyra nodded, her voice hollow. "They're not just after me. They want my people. Our power. We were once a peaceful race, connected to the land, to the stars. But now we're hunted." Alex didn't know what to say. There was so much she hadn't told him, so much she was still keeping inside. But this was no time to press her for answers. "We'll go there. If it's a safe place, we can hide out, regroup. We'll figure out what to do next." Lyra looked at him, her dark eyes searching his face for something. Maybe reassurance, maybe understanding. After a long moment, she nodded, the slightest hint of relief in her gaze. They moved forward, the storm growing fiercer with each step. The snow, now ankle-deep, was beginning to slow their progress. Alex's legs burned with the effort, but Lyra seemed to glide across the snow, her movements graceful and precise despite the cold. As they neared the mountains, the wind began to die down, and the landscape grew eerily still. The snow-covered ground was smooth, untouched, as if the mountains themselves were hiding something. "We're close," Lyra said softly, her voice steady now. "This way." She led him through a narrow pass between two towering cliffs, the walls of rock rising up on either side of them like sentinels guarding a secret. The air grew colder still, and Alex felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. There was something about this place, something ancient, as if the land itself had been waiting for them. They reached a small alcove, hidden from view by the jagged rocks. It was sheltered from the wind, offering some reprieve from the storm. Alex could hear the faint hum of energy in the air, as though the very rocks were alive, vibrating with a power he couldn't understand. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes scanning the walls of the alcove. She placed her hand against the rock, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft tremor, the ground beneath them shifted. A section of the wall slid open, revealing a hidden passageway leading deeper into the mountain. "This is it," Lyra whispered, her voice filled with reverence. "The sanctuary of my people." Alex stared at the entrance, his mind racing. What was this place? And why hadn't she told him about it sooner? He could see the hesitation in Lyra's eyes, the conflict that still lingered within her. "You don't have to tell me everything," Alex said, his voice quiet but firm. But you need to know that you can trust me. I'll stand by you, no matter what." Lyra's eyes softened, the walls she had built around herself starting to crack. She stepped into the passageway, motioning for Alex to follow. "I know you will, but there are things you need to understand. Things you won't believe until you see them for yourself." They entered the tunnel, the temperature inside growing warmer. The air was thick with the scent of earth, and the walls glowed with faint markings, ancient symbols that Alex couldn't read but could feel pulsing with energy. The deeper they went, the more intense the feeling became, like something alive was watching them, guiding them. Eventually, the passage opened into a cavern, vast and silent. The floor was smooth, and in the center of the cavern was a large stone platform. At first, Alex thought it was just another part of the cave's structure, but as he stepped closer, he saw that it was intricately carved, covered in strange symbols and markings that seemed to shift as if they were alive. Lyra stopped in front of the platform, her eyes locked on it. "This is where it began," she said softly, almost to herself. "Where my people first connected to the stars. The power that runs through us, it comes from here." Alex's pulse quickened. This place, it wasn't just a sanctuary. It was the source of her people's power, the heart of their civilization. And somehow, it was connected to Lyra. "You're part of this, aren't you?" Alex asked, his voice filled with awe. "You're not just a refugee. You're a key to something bigger." Lyra turned to him, her expression haunted. "I didn't want to be. But I am. My people, we were meant to be protectors, keepers of this power. But we were betrayed. The Empire, they wanted this energy, and they've been hunting us for centuries." Alex took a step closer, his mind spinning with the weight of her words. "And the hunters, they're not just after you, they're after this power." Lyra nodded, her face shadowed with guilt. "Yes, and they will stop at nothing to take it from us. I was supposed to protect it, but I failed. Now they'll come for it all." For the first time, Alex understood the magnitude of the danger they were in. It wasn't just about surviving the storm or escaping the hunters. It was about protecting something ancient, something that could change the course of history. He looked at Lyra, his resolve hardening. "We'll fight them," he said, his voice unwavering. "We'll protect this place, and we'll make sure they never get their hands on your people's power." Lyra met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. "I don't know if we can stop them, but with you, maybe we have a chance." Alex wasn't sure how they would defeat the Empire or what they could do to protect this ancient power. But one thing was certain, he wasn't going to let Lyra fight this battle alone. Not anymore. They had come this far, and together they would face whatever came next. The plan. The cavern was eerily silent, save for the sound of their breathing and the faint hum of the glowing symbols around them. The stone platform in the center pulsed with an energy that Alex couldn't fully understand, yet he felt it deep within his bones, an ancient power, ancient knowledge, now lying dormant. It was the kind of energy that could reshape worlds, that could turn the tides of wars, and that could be wielded in ways both beautiful and terrifying. Lyra stood before the platform, her hand hovering just above it, her fingers trembling slightly as if she were trying to make a connection. Alex watched her closely, noticing the way her entire posture had changed since they had entered this hidden place. She no longer looked like the frightened alien who had sought refuge in his shelter. She seemed different now, more resolute. Alex took a step closer, his mind still racing with the enormity of what they were up against. "So, what now?" he asked, his voice low. "How do we stop them?" Lyra turned to face him, her eyes hard with determination. "The Empire doesn't just want me. They want what's here, what's in this place. This power," she said, gesturing to the platform, "is what they've been after. And if they get their hands on it, they'll use it to crush my people, to control the galaxy." She paused, swallowing hard. "And once they've taken it, they'll come for your people. They won't stop. Alex's heart skipped a beat at the thought. The Empire wasn't just a distant threat. They were coming for everything. Her people, his, anyone who stood in their way. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was a fight for the future of everything. "Then we fight," Alex said, his voice steady, despite the tension twisting inside him. He looked at Lyra, his eyes narrowing with resolve. "But we need a plan. A real one. How do we stop them?" Lyra hesitated, her brow furrowing in thought. "It's not going to be easy. The Empire has technology we can't even begin to understand. They have an army, soldiers trained to track us, to capture us." She clenched her fists. "And they have a commander, the one who's been leading them. He's ruthless, more so than any of the others. His name is Fornak. If he gets to this place, if he learns how to harness the power here." She trailed off, her voice cracking under the weight of the realization. Alex stepped forward, his hands balled into fists. "Then we have to make sure he doesn't get that chance." He paused, looking around at the glowing markings on the walls. "You said there was a way to protect this place. What do we need to do?" Lyra's gaze softened, and she glanced at the symbols on the walls. "There is a defense system," she explained. "An ancient one. My people used it to guard this place from invaders long ago. But it's not just a weapon. It requires a connection to the land, the energy here, and a willing sacrifice." Alex's eyebrows shot up. "Sacrifice?" Lyra nodded gravely. "Yes. To activate the defenses, someone has to bond with the power of the planet itself. It will give them the strength to protect this place, but at a cost. The connection is permanent. Once made, it can't be undone." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. The idea of becoming permanently linked to this place, to this power, was unnerving. But it also made sense. If they were going to protect this place, they would need every advantage they could get. Lyra turned to him, her expression serious. "I can do it. I'm the one who needs to bond with the energy here. It's my people's heritage. My duty." Alex shook his head. "No." He stepped closer, reaching out to her. "You don't have to do this alone. I'll help you. I'll be with you." Lyra's eyes softened, but she didn't waver. "You don't understand. You're not connected to this place like I am. It has to be me. I'm the one who can access its power. But I need someone to help me prepare, to keep the hunters away long enough for me to connect with it fully." A heavy silence hung in the air as Alex processed what she was saying. If they were going to make it out of this alive, they would need to make a stand. It wasn't just about hiding anymore. It was about fighting back, using whatever they could to turn the tide. Alex nodded slowly. "All right. So what's the plan? How do we keep the hunters away while you make this connection?" Lyra smiled faintly, her eyes gleaming with a mixture of sadness and strength. "We'll need to create a diversion. The hunters won't just stumble upon this place. They'll be searching for us, trying to track our movements. We'll lead them into a trap." "A trap?" Alex asked, raising an eyebrow. "What kind of trap?" Lyra's gaze turned distant for a moment, as if she were seeing something beyond the cavern walls. "The hunters rely on technology to track us. They have drones, scouts, and weapons designed to hunt down beings like me. But they can't track what they can't see." Alex felt a spark of understanding. "You want to use the terrain, the snowstorm. It'll mess with their tracking systems." Lyra nodded. "Exactly. We'll lure them into the mountains. There's a narrow pass that leads them right into a dead end. Once they're there, we'll cut off their escape." "And then what?" Alex asked, already knowing the answer. "Then we fight." Her voice was resolute. "We hit them hard, hit them fast. I'll use my power to disrupt their technology, but only if we can get them into position." Alex's heart raced. This was it. This was the moment where everything would change. Either they succeeded or they failed. There was no middle ground. "All right," Alex said, his voice steady. "We'll need to move quickly. How much time do we have before they find us? Lyra's eyes flickered with uncertainty. They're close. Too close. We need to prepare now. The weight of the moment pressed down on Alex. There was no more time to waste. He looked at Lyra, his gaze meeting hers with unwavering determination. Then let's get to work. Lyra nodded, her lips curling into a faint but fierce smile. We'll do this together. With that, they began their preparations. Alex gathered their supplies, fortifying the entrance to the cavern and setting up a series of traps designed to slow down the hunters. Lyra stood by the stone platform, her hands resting lightly on it, feeling the power beneath her fingers. As she prepared herself for the bond that would connect her to the energy of this ancient place, Alex knew one thing for sure: this battle was only the beginning. And they would fight, not just for their survival, but for everything that mattered. The Empire wouldn't know what hit them. The final stand. The storm raged outside the cavern, howling through the narrow mountain passes as if the very winds were conspiring against them. Alex could feel the tension building in the air as the final moments of preparation came to a head. Lyra had positioned herself before the ancient stone platform, her hands resting on the glowing surface, the energy of the planet pulsing through her, and her face set in a mask of determination. But Alex could see the strain in her eyes. Whatever she was about to do, it would change everything. The hunters were out there. He knew that for certain. They were closing in. The plan they had crafted, luring the hunters into a trap, fighting them back, and protecting the power that had brought them here, was their last shot. There was no turning back. He adjusted his gear, checking the weapons and supplies they had scavenged, making sure the traps they'd set around the cavern entrance were still intact. They would need every advantage to hold their ground. He glanced over at Lyra, who seemed so small in this vast cavern, but Alex knew better than anyone that she wasn't small at all. She was the key to everything. Without her, there would be no chance of stopping the Empire's forces. Lyra's fingers brushed over the stone, and her eyes closed as she took a deep breath, her lips moving silently, as if calling to the power deep within the planet. The symbols on the stone platform glowed brighter, the light spilling out across the cavern like a living pulse. Alex's heart quickened in response. The power of the planet, of her people, was awakening. But so was the danger. "They're coming," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible over the roar of the wind outside. "I can feel them." Alex's pulse quickened. It wasn't just the storm. The Empire's hunters were closing in on their location, tracking them like bloodhounds, relying on technology that could pierce through the snowstorm's veil. It was only a matter of time before they reached the hidden entrance. Their entire survival hinged on whether Lyra could fully connect with the energy of this place, and if they could outsmart the Empire long enough to launch a counteroffensive. "I'll make sure they don't get past me," Alex said, turning toward the entrance with a determined look on his face. "You just focus on the power. We can't let them breach this place." Lyra nodded, her expression tight but resolute. "I'll be ready." Her voice quivered slightly, but Alex could see the fire in her eyes. This was no longer the frightened alien who had once stumbled into his shelter. This was someone who had accepted her role, someone who was ready to do whatever it took to protect her people, and his. The ground beneath them trembled as the first of the Empire's hunters arrived at the outer perimeter. The roar of their heavy boots filled the air, their armored forms visible even through the thick blizzard. Alex's heart raced, but he forced himself to focus. The traps he had set were their first line of defense. They would slow the hunters down long enough for Lyra to fully harness the energy of the planet, long enough for him to take the fight to them. He sprinted toward the front of the cavern, positioning himself at the choke point where the narrow mountain pass opened up into a wider area. This would be the first place the hunters would come through. He crouched low, his hand gripping the handle of his knife, ready for anything. A deafening explosion of sound rang through the mountain pass. One of the traps had triggered. The hunters were on the move. Lyra's voice echoed in his mind. "Remember, Alex, they have no mercy." Do not hesitate. With a final glance toward her, Alex stepped into position, his body tensed and ready for action. He could hear the heavy footsteps of the hunters, their movements deliberate and efficient, cutting through the storm like a sharp blade. As the first hunter came into view, Alex's instincts kicked in. He moved silently, a shadow in the snow, and struck. His knife slashed through the air, finding its target in a moment of precision. The hunter fell, but the others were too close. There was no time to think. Lyra's energy surged through the cavern like a tidal wave, a force so powerful it rattled the walls. The symbols on the stone platform flared to life, casting eerie shadows across the cavern. The ground vibrated as the ancient defenses began to stir, activating with the energy Lyra had tapped into. The air around her shimmered with power, and Alex could feel it even from where he stood, a heat that burned like fire, but not from the sun. The remaining hunters were upon him, but Alex wasn't alone. Lyra's power was now a living force, surrounding them both, distorting the air with its raw energy. The Empire's soldiers hesitated, unsure of what they were facing, but it didn't matter. Their technology, advanced as it was nothing against the pure, unfiltered power of the planet. With each movement, Lyra's power intensified. Alex fought with everything he had, blocking strikes and disarming hunters, but it was Lyra who kept the hunters off balance. The energy she wielded distorted their weapons, frying their tracking systems and scrambling their technology. Their attacks became erratic, chaotic, as their gear malfunctioned in the face of such overwhelming force. One hunter managed to break through the line, charging directly at Lyra. Alex saw the threat and moved faster than he ever had before. He tackled the hunter, the two of them crashing into the ground in a flurry of limbs and steel. The hunter's helmet cracked with the force of Alex's blow, revealing a scared face beneath, eyes wide with surprise. The hunter scrambled for his weapon, but Alex was faster, pulling his knife from his belt and slashing at the man's throat. But it wasn't over. The leader of the hunters, Vornak, emerged from the blizzard like a shadow, his figure looming large in the doorway. His eyes, glowing red from beneath his helmet, locked on Lyra. She stood at the stone platform, her energy crackling around her, but she was weakening. The strain of tapping into the power of the planet was taking its toll. Get away from her, Alex roared, throwing himself in front of Lyra. Vornak didn't flinch. You're too late, human. She's already too far gone. Lyra's voice rang out, steady and clear. No, Vornak. You're too late. This place is protected now. You cannot have it. Vornak growled, his hand reaching for the blaster at his side, but before he could fire, Lyra's energy surged one final time. The cavern shook violently as the full force of the planet's power erupted from the stone platform. A blinding light enveloped them all, and Alex had to shield his eyes. The light didn't fade immediately. When it did, the hunters, Vornak included, were on the ground, their armor cracked and their weapons fried beyond repair. They were alive, but barely, stunned by the sheer force of Lyra's power. Lyra collapsed to her knees, the glow around her flickering weakly. Her connection to the planet had drained her more than she had anticipated. Alex rushed to her side, his heart pounding in his chest. Lyra. She looked up at him, her lips curling into a faint smile. We did it. We won. The battle had been hard, but they had succeeded. The Empire had been stopped, for now. The planet was safe. And so were they. Alex lifted Lyra into his arms, feeling the weight of everything they had endured. They had come so far, and though the fight was over, it was only just beginning for Lyra's people, and for him. Together, they would rebuild. And together, they would face whatever came next. The final stand wasn't just a victory. It was the start of something new, a beginning for their future. And for the first time, Alex wasn't afraid. Whatever the universe threw their way, they would face it together.